Hello everyone, welcome to today's video in which we're going to talk about how to create water or the water effects as a texture that can be assigned to any geometry or plane. So this isn't, I first want to stress that this is not the same thing as simulating water in the VFX realm where we actually create a particle sim. This is a much more rudimentary stylization of water, and it's really nice for using in background effects where we don't have to worry about things like waves interacting with solid objects, right? So this is really good for like the ocean, the surface of the ocean, or if you have a body of water like a pond or something like that, this will kind of give the illusion that there is going to be water without actually having to simulate it. So the benefit to this is that it's going to be very economical. It's not going to take a whole bunch of work for your computer, for Maya to process and render this stuff out. And the way we're going to do that is actually with these. These are normal maps, and you may have some familiarity with creating some of these normal maps for your other assets and things like Substance Painter. But these normal maps all work for the same object, and they're labeled as such in sequence. And the way this works is that every normal map is for a specific frame. And there are 120 frames that we have here, and all of these move a little bit every frame. So this is actually an animated texture that we can assign to our object, and it will give us the illusion that the surface of this plane or the surface of this 3D object is actually moving like water. And then we can, of course, texture it to look like whatever type of water that we want. So that's what today's video tutorial is going to be about. It's going to teach you guys how to use animated texture maps, for this case water, and then of course how to modify your Pixar surface so that way when we render it out in RenderMan it can give the illusion of water. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a blank Maya document in here, but I've added a light so that way whenever we render this out we can just immediately see it. And the only thing that we're going to start with is just going to be this plane. So I'm going to add a plane into my space. This plane is UV unwrapped and it takes up a square tile on my UV tile, so I don't have to worry about that. About UV unwrapping this guy. However, if you do want to assign it to something else, let's say a cube that you're going to be using for a body of water, you may want to make sure that that cube is properly UV unwrapped. But now that we have this plane, we can go ahead and open up our Hypershade and start creating our node networks. I'm going to hit Tab, type in Pixar Surface, and we're going to call this water. Now, this default Pixar surface we're going to leave alone just for a little bit because I need to add another node called the Pixar normal map, and this is where we're going to be plugging in all of our normal maps. So if you have the directory already kind of memorized, you can go ahead and click on that. I'm going to navigate to, let's see if I can find it. And once you navigate to this full sequence or this full collection of normal maps, 1 through 120, you're just going to select the very first frame. So this is called 0001.png. We're going to hit open. Now, something very important to know. Once you have this directory in your file name over here at the right, you are going to replace a portion of this directory. We're going to look for where it says 0001. We're going to get rid of that and we're going to replace it with this F4, and we're going to put our arrow brackets next to it. So there's an arrow bracket, F4, and arrow bracket. What this does is this tells Maya that, hey, I'm dealing with a whole bunch of images and I want you to go and find all 120 of them. And then it's going to find that and load them up. Every frame is going to be, or every normal map is going to be correspondent to every frame in your animation. So with all that said and done, we can plug this into bump normal, just as we normally do. There are some things that you can modify and change in here depending on the 3D object you're attaching this normal map to. You might want to reduce the scale of this normal map, and that's done by your bump scale. So currently it defaults to 1. That may or may not work. I noticed that with flat planes, it's better to go a little bit lower. I'm going to reduce this down to 0.5. And once we do that, then we can just focus on getting this Pixar surface to look a little bit more like water. So here we have our property viewer right here. And for water, I think what we can do, we've got a couple of choices. If we want our water to be completely opaque, we can just make this color blue. And I like choosing this green blue. And I like to give it a little bit of roughness. So we're going to increase the specular edge color to white. Then we're going to dial down the roughness. We can also add a clear coat, and this just helps kind of give it this other secondary glossy nature to it, which is kind of what we see here. And so once we've done all of that, let's see, I'm gonna also change this Lambert to a color that kind of resembles water. So that way, whenever we assign it, we can see it in the viewports. And let's go ahead, select this object, and we're just going to right click and hold, go down to assign existing material and let go on water. And so now this guy should render out kind of like water. And let's pull up the hypershade just to kind of compare what we're looking at here. So this is the normal map that I have in the hypershade, and currently the bump scale is at 0.1, but if we increase that value, you should be able to see now different waves. And sometimes if it doesn't show up, that's okay. Let's switch to, there we go, another frame. I should note frame 0 gets skipped because there's only image 1 to image 120, so technically it all starts at 1. So it looks like I was having some clipping, so I'm going to reduce the bump scale down to 0.25. And now I've got a very, very cool water texture. And this water texture moves and changes as time progresses in my time slider. So if I choose a new frame, let's say from 10 to 15, you can kind of see that the scale or the waves look a little bit different comparatively to before. And so this water actually moves with you. So that's how you can set up a very basic water. Now, a couple of important things to note. This water is one solid color, and that's all we can do for that, and it's also opaque. So I've got another example that we can look at if we want this water to be perhaps see-through. So here's another file, and I have here, let's see if I can switch out to perspective. I have here a couple of things. Number one is I've assigned this cube that same water texture. And I also have some geometry underneath it, like this ground plane, and I have a 3D model inside of it, which is really nice. So the reason why we've got this, let me see if I can make this Lambert a little bit transparent so we can see, is I want to see how the depth of this object, or how the visibility of this object might change the further it is sunken into my cube of water. And so let's pull up the hypershade and talk about what we've done. So first things first, we have our normal map. It's plugged in just like normal. I have set the bump scale to 0.1. This is my Pixar surface. This Pixar surface, I've textured it with a glass shader. So you may notice that instead of having the diffuse color set to blue, I've dialed the gain down to 0. So that means diffuse is off. I've scrolled all the way down until I found glass. I bumped up the refraction and the reflection gain to 1 for both of them, and I've changed my refraction color to this very, very light blue. I should note that when you're messing around with the refraction color, the value should always be up here at white, 1, and it should never go darker. So I wanted the color to be a little bit blue, so I just added a tint into it. And then, of course, specular edge color, let's boost that up to white, and let's go down to clear coat and also boost up the clear coat edge color to white as well. And there we go, that has it. Something else that you can do here is you can also assign a Pixar texture which has the same directory of the normal map, and you can plug in result R, which is kind of a grayscale value, into a displacement line. So in this case, I'm actually going to be modifying the geometry via displacement using these normal maps and its grayscale. It's going to just help give a little bit extra to it, a little bit more realism. And we can kind of see the waves bouncing up and down. So with all that said and done, we've assigned it to this cube. And now, let's get a good angle of it. We'll just go ahead and render it to see what we're looking at. And we should get this body of water that is a solid. Because this guy is not assigned to a flat plane, it actually has volume, which makes it to where, depending on the angle that we look down, we might be able to see, for example, this sunken train in the ocean floor. theoretically, I suppose. Something else that you might be able to, or that you might be interested in working with is roughness, glass roughness. That will control how murky the water potentially is. So right now we've got a relatively decent view of this sunken train car. But if I go back here and select my water Pixar surface, go all the way down to glass roughness, instead of, let's say, 0.135 where it's set now, if I make this 0.4, now we should have some murkier waters. And what we are able to tell out of the sunken passenger train car is now going to be very, very, very much more occluded or more cloudy. And so this can kind of give you the illusion that this water is perhaps very deep, or if you want, or perhaps polluted. But of course, if you want crystal clear waters, dial this roughness down. You can enter something like 0.1 perhaps, and you'll get something that looks very clear. So that is how we can handle water textures. I should note that if we batch render this out, because we have a sequence of normal maps, I've got a recording that I can play here in which we can see the textures are moving throughout time, which is really nice. So if you'd like to grab these normal maps from me, do let me know next time you're in class. But hopefully this was helpful and kind of answered some questions about how to set up things like water. And I know it's not the best water because we're not simulating anything, but this is a really nice, very quick, as you can tell, solution to getting perhaps a body of water like a lake, pond, or ocean to read very well in your 3D projects. So with that being said, if you have any questions, do let me know. Anyways, hopefully you found this helpful. Good luck with your projects, and bye-bye.